Covering letter essentially is a dark room where the illumination itself becomes a piece of correspondence as the shaft of light interacts with a descending film of mist. And essentially, it is within this relationship with this light through which the alphabets, the letters, which are essentially the absence of light, they are shadowy letters that roll on the floor towards you as one confronts the work, appears in inverse, and at the sort of bottom of this film of mist, it is fairly illegible and continues to gain legibility as the letter rises within this film of descending mist. At some point, it becomes evident that these collective letters, these alphabets, form a piece of correspondence written in first person. So when you walk in, it says, "Dear friend, friends have been urging me to write to you for the sake of humanity," and makes a very distilled 7-line plea to rethink what you might do with the world to, as stated in the letter, save the world from going to a savage state. It's really when the letter rises fully that you realizes that the author of the letter was Gandhi and the intended recipient was Hitler, written at a moment which was a key moment in the world's history because this was 5 weeks before the outbreak of the Second World War and perhaps weeks before the concentration camps, which until then were really labor camps with extreme mortality rates, were soon to become chambers of death. And it's kind of written at this kind of imminent moment, and yet the letter itself is almost like a haiku. And like a lot of Gandhian gestures, it almost feels like the letter is meant to convey a freight of provocations, not just to the intended recipient on a particular date, but perhaps go beyond its delivery date and intended recipient to speak to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And it is in that location that covering letter, I think, reaches out today to any person who might inhabit the space of the letter and also traverse and walk through the letter, momentarily occupying the space of correspondence between possibly one of the greatest proponents of peace writing to one of the most brutal perpetrators of violence that ever inhabited this planet at that point in time. And I think the location of the body in between these two figures, these absent figures through this piece of correspondence, is really a space of self-reflection that I think makes covering letter. So the way covering letter came to me was, of course, there was the interaction with the actual letter, which hangs in a corner of a beautiful small Gandhi museum in Bombay. And the letter kind of remained with me some ways in my mind for a long period of time. But the way it came to me as covering letter in my mind's eye was this traversable film that anyone could occupy momentarily and also could kind of absorb these alphabets on their bodies as they leave. This is really the image. But over time, and I know there's an inescapable relationship with the cleansing image of mist, but also the freight of historical experience of this descending vapor that could be read in many, many ways. And that's really something that's actually emerged from the viewing of the work, and others have experienced that too, and people have had very strong visceral experience of inhabiting the letter along with that history. And I've experienced this a lot of times in my work, that images form in the making of the work. They don't form in the conception of the work, and this has been yet another experience of that, really.